All right, so you want to talk El Salvador Bitcoin, right? You've sent us a pretty impressive pile here to get through.
Economic analyses, personal stories.
Yeah,
Looks like you're aiming to dig a little deeper than the headlines.
definitely.
Really get a feel for the genuine impact of this whole thing.
Yeah, it's
So
kind of a
follow me.
fascinating experiment, right? It
Okay.
really is. I mean, a country decides to like overhaul its entire financial system basically overnight.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack.
It's wild, right? I mean, we see the pictures, El Salvador, beautiful beaches, volcanoes, incredible surfing.
Right.
But what's the economic reality behind those idyllic images?
That's the thing, right? And I think that's key to understanding why El Salvador would make such a radical move, you know? Before we even get to Bitcoin, we need to understand the situation they were facing. So think heavy reliance on remittances, limited economic growth.
Okay.
And to top it off, they've been using the US dollar as their official currency since 2001.
Wow. Okay, so this whole dollarization thing,
Yeah.
it's like being stuck using a friend's car,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Like, it's convenient, but you're stuck with all their choices.
That is a great way to put it. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. So they basically handed over control of their monetary policy to the United States.
Right.
Right. So that means no adjusting interest rates to stimulate the economy, no devaluing currency to make exports more competitive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their hands are tied. Imagine trying to steer a car, but you have no control over the steering wheel or the pedals.
Yeah,
That's a tough spot to be in.
it is.
So along comes Bitcoin, this decentralized digital currency,
All right.
promising freedom from traditional financial systems.
Freedom.
I can see the appeal.
Absolutely. And El Salvador goes all over. In June 2021, they passed the Bitcoin law, making Bitcoin legal tender
Wow.
alongside the US dollar.
Okay.
This is huge.
Oh, how did that even happen?
Right.
Like, was there widespread support for such a move?
So the vote was 62 to 84 in favor of the law.
Wow.
So it wasn't a unanimous decision by any stretch.
62 to 84.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it was a whirlwind. It was
Yeah.
like proposed and passed in a matter of days.
Wow. So it wasn't just about like accepting Bitcoin.
Yeah. The Bitcoin law went way beyond just saying like, yeah, you can use this here.
100%.
Yeah, declaring it legal tender meant that businesses were required to accept it.
Wow.
Although the law did allow for some exceptions.
Okay.
They offered tax breaks for Bitcoin transactions to try to attract investors.
Right.
And then there's the Chivo Wallet.
Right. Which, from my understanding, is that government-backed digital wallet
Exactly.
that's supposed to make it easier for people to use Bitcoin for their everyday purchases.
Yeah, it's like Bitcoin 101 for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a crash course.
Crash course.
But the real question is why?
Yeah.
Why go through all this trouble?
Yeah. Why?
And the answer to that lies in the problems that El Salvador was desperately trying to solve.
So they passed this Bitcoin law,
Right.
hoping it's going to like fix all these problems
Right.
that are kind of baked into El Salvador's economy.
Exactly. And I think one of the most immediate impacts they were going for was to lower the cost of remittances,
Right.
which, as you know, is a lifeline for so many Salvadorans.
Totally. Yeah.
One of the articles that you sent told a story of a woman who used Bitcoin to send money back home to her family.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up being significantly cheaper and faster than using like Western Union or traditional methods.
Right.
So that's one example of it working.
Right. So that's a tangible way that this law is
Yeah.
impacting people. Cheaper remittances,
Absolutely.
more money staying in the pockets.
And for families that rely on those funds,
Yeah.
you know, even a small percentage
Yeah.
can make a huge difference in
Yeah.
their lives.
Yeah.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing. You know, you have to remember that a large portion of El Salvador's population was unbanked,
Right.
with limited access to technology and even basic financial literacy.
Totally. And I mean, using Bitcoin even now
Right.
requires a certain level of like tech savviness.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
it's one thing to convince like me to use Bitcoin or you to use
Oh,
Bitcoin.
right.
It's a whole nother thing to be like, Grandma, you got to start paying for your groceries
Yeah.
using this digital.
It's a learning curve for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that uneven adoption led to some interesting developments.
Yeah.
One of the things you sent was about this Bitcoin beach community. Have you heard of this?
Yeah. So this is in El Zonte.
El Zonte, exactly.
Right. It's a small coastal town.
Yeah, a small coastal town where they went all in on Bitcoin, even before it was legal tender.
So it was like this weird little microcosm
Exactly.
of like hyper Bitcoin adoption.
Yeah, you had reports of like people getting paid in Bitcoin businesses operating solely on the Bitcoin network. It was like this glimpse into like an alternate reality.
Yeah.
En inglés, a través de una transmisión en vivo desde la red social TikTok y frente a un público en su mayoría extranjero, el presidente Nayib Bukele anunció la noche del sábado su proyecto Bitcoin City. El anuncio de Bitcoin City se dio durante la finalización de la Bitcoin Week. Se trata de una zona económica especial que estará ubicada en Conchagua, La Unión, frente al Golfo de Fonseca. Funcionará totalmente alrededor de los criptoactivos, de acuerdo a palabras de Bukele.
Se ha considerado todo, la creación de la ciudad, tratamiento y gestión del agua y de aguas servidas, todo. Puerto, aeropuerto, entre todo lo que ofrecemos, el volcán genera el vapor para la turbina, para la generación de electricidad. Tenemos electricidad, minería de criptomonedas, agricultura, cultura y deporte, todo que viene del volcán. Pero no tendremos impuestos sobre la renta.
They refused to help El Salvador implement the Bitcoin law.
Yeah, and their reasons I think are telling.
Right.
They say
Para
it's
siempre,
concerns about
el 0%.
transparency or lack thereof in Bitcoin transactions,
Yeah.
as well as the
No tendremos impuestos sobre las ganancias.
of Bitcoin.
Which is huge.
Pueden invertir
So
aquí,
it's like
ganar
a
dinero aquí,
double-edged sword,
está
right?
bien.
It's like, on one hand, you've got these like individual
Pueden
stories
hacer los comercios que deseen. No tendremos impuestos sobre la propiedad.
of really cool experiment happening in El Zonte.
Si van a hacer un gran edificio, no quieren pagar impuestos sobre eso, entonces no los pagas.
Organizations that are like, whoa, this is
Don't do it.
maybe
Nosotros
not
queremos que
good idea.
contraten personas, no que paguen impuestos sobre esas contrataciones, entonces no las pagarán.
Right.
0% de impuestos municipales.
Yeah.
But also exposing themselves
Este anuncio
to a
llega en un
whole new set
momento
of risks.
crítico para la presidencia de Bukele, ya que tan recientemente como el pasado septiembre, encuestas realizadas por LPG Datos revelaron que más del 53% de los salvadoreños no apoyan el Bitcoin como moneda de curso legal. Durante su discurso en la playa Misata, el presidente aprovechó para desestimar el rechazo popular a su proyecto.
Right.
Right, because now it's not just like
Yeah.
tech people talking about this or economists talking about this.
Exactly.
Like front page news everywhere.
Right.
So how did the world react?
It was a mixed bag, right?
Hmm.
Which, reflects, I think, kind of the diverse opinions about cryptocurrency in general.
Yeah.
Some people hailed El Salvador as this like pioneer, this beacon of hope for a more decentralized financial future.
Right, like they were brave enough to do it.
Yeah, they actually did it. They put it into practice. They showed that it could be done, or at least attempted.
Right, but I'm sure not everyone was like, go El Salvador.
Right. Well, of course not. I mean, there was plenty of skepticism. Remember the IMF? They weren't just worried. They were like waving gigantic red flags.
Yeah, they were like, guys, don't do it.
Right.
Don't do it.
This will destabilize everything.
Yeah.
You're going to crash and burn.
Yeah, and those warnings from institutions like that
Yeah.
carry weight
100%.
because they can affect
Sufrimos
your
algunos
ability to
ataques
get
de la
loans in the future.
oposición.
Exactly.
Aunque no lo crean, sí hay oposición política
Exactly.
pequeña, pero
So
sí
El Salvador
existe.
is making this very
Y estaban quejándose por
Yeah.
Bitcoin, mal informando a las personas, diciendo que el Bitcoin es malo, que no deberíamos utilizarlo como moneda porque es invisible, porque no se ve, por
And I
supuesto.
think to understand that, you got to look
Son
beyond
pajas
just
de
the
todos, y ahí están.
and look at
Hasta el
kind of the
momento,
bigger
se desconocen
picture for El
detalles más
Salvador.
exactos sobre cuándo darán inicio las construcciones de esta zona especial, más allá que en los 60 días posteriores a obtener su financiamiento en el 2022.
They want to break free. They want to chart their own course.
Yeah.
And they see Bitcoin as a way to do that.
So it's almost like their legacy is less about whether Bitcoin works or not.
Right.
It's just the fact that they were willing to try something so radical.
And that they might inspire others to do the same.
Right.
You know, other countries, especially in Latin America, Africa, are looking at this and saying, could this work for us?
So it's like this whole thing is less about Bitcoin
Yeah.
and more about just the future of finance in a way.
It's a microcosm of this global debate about money, right?
Yeah.
What even is money? And who gets to decide?
Right.
Exactly.
But what's the takeaway here for our listeners? Like, what do we want them thinking about?
I think the most important thing is to stay curious, right?
Yeah.
Like, keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Be open to new possibilities.
Yeah.
The world of finance is changing so fast.
It's true.
And El Salvador's experiment, whether it succeeds or fails, I think offers us this really interesting glimpse into a potential future.
Yeah, it's like
That's as exciting as it is uncertain.
it's a fascinating story that's still being written.
Exactly.
But this has been a really interesting deep dive.
Yeah.
Learned a lot.
You too.
Appreciate your insights.
Happy to be here.